This video is going to be a long overdue film study look at Eddie Jackson, who's a veteran safety that the Ravens signed just prior to training camp. Potential starter, I should say. It's an interesting development, if you ask me, what with all the skill and talent that they have at the DB position after drafting Nate Wiggins. Obviously, we let Geno Stone go. He's a talented secondary nonetheless, and Jackson is extremely smart, savvy, and very experienced. Long career with the Bears already. The Ravens had let go of Geno Stone, or I guess I should say allowed him to sign with the Bengals in free agency. Drafted one safety late in the draft, I think round 6. Also signed a quite notable UDFA, Bo Brad, out of Maryland. He's a Howard County high school product, by the way, in case you don't know. With Kyle Hamilton and Marcus Williams under contract. And then they re-signed Arthur Millette, who Millette had a very underrated season in 2023. I'm sure at this point, if you're listening to this video, you understand that. You knew that already. You didn't need me to make you aware of it. Nonetheless, that's 3 safeties. It would seem to slot Hamilton as one of the deep half safeties, occasionally a middle of the field free safety if Marcus Williams is the guy who rolls up. Getting a hold of a guy like Jackson, who has, I think, 15 career interceptions, first of all, that's significant if you ask me. 100 games played. I'll let some film flow through here. Now, this will only be film from early 2022, impact film. He's got 6 defensive touchdowns. That's substantial, if you ask me. Whenever you're talking about someone who's scoring a touchdown about once every 15 games from a defensive standpoint, I think that's pretty considerable. He's generally played 16 games each season, by the way. He had an injury late in 2022, and that injury appeared to bridge into 2023. Caused him to only play 12 games in each of those 2 years. Otherwise, you're talking about 14 or 16 games played. Now, I want to be upfront about something. I have an affinity for the Bears defense. The Bears defense that they currently have, the talent that is there in Chicago right now, moving into 2024, and the way they played at the back half of 2023. I thought they played the Detroit Lions extremely well in 2023 in their pair of divisional games. Detroit committed 7 turnovers in their 2 matchups against the Bears. Very easily could have been 2 wins by Chicago, by the way. Detroit had a comeback win at home in Week 11, a game that the Bears really controlled for large stretches. They held a 26-14 lead with a little over 4 minutes left in the game. The Lions came back and won. As this relates to Eddie Jackson, I'm leading up to it, so bear with me. Now, you as a Ravens fan, you may not put too much stock into limiting or dominating the Lions' offense. I understand that. That's your prerogative, especially with the way the Ravens laid it down on the Lions at home. But add the data to this as it relates to the Bears' defense, and I'll pull it back, tie it together, I should say, with Eddie Jackson in a couple of minutes. In the last 6 games of 2023, the Bears' defense allowed 15.5 points per game. They went 4-2. 1 3-point loss, and then a loss to the Packers in Week 18. If you extrapolate back 1 week further than that 6-game stretch to end the season, again, that would be referencing the Week 11 loss in Detroit. The Bears defensively forced 18 turnovers in their final 7 games. They're extremely active, very fast, and the film, I think, shows that quite clearly. Even dating back to a couple of games at the midseason mark. Week 7 against the Raiders, I took note of some of their young talent, did a video on Tyreek Stevenson. They held Devontae Adams to 7 catches on 12 targets for only 57 yards in a really dominant win. The higher level defensive play in 2023 does coincide with Jackson's return to health. Basically, Jackson being able to play 100% of the snaps kind of overlaps really nicely with the Bears playing a high level of defense, allowing, again, less than 16 points per game. That's why I mentioned the defensive consistency. That's why I mentioned the level that the Bears defense was playing at late in 2023. When he was in the lineup consistently, the Bears allowed less points. Is that causation? Is that correlation? Is it none of those things? In Week 1, he played 100% of the snaps, mind you, and I think they gave up 38 points or something like that. He missed the last 5 games of 2022. I think with a Liz Frank fracture in his foot. There's a wet field, I believe, in Week 11 or Week 12 against the Jets. Comes back Week 1 last year, 2023. plays 100% of the snaps, then was inactive for 5 of the next 6 games. Based on the information that I could find, as far as an injury report, he was listed having a foot injury, either questionable or out or doubtful, from week 3 to week 8. He comes back in week 9, plays 100% of the snaps until, like I said, that regular season finale, a 17-9 loss to the Packers. He played 100% of the snaps in that as well. Throughout the rest of the regular season, week 9 to week 18, played every single snap on defense. I have some film from that time frame. I'll be honest with you, I'll pass on my observations. I had to force myself to find a larger selection of film to balance out my thoughts, because when I was reading people's reactions on social media 2 or 3 days ago, my thoughts were not, based on the film I had watched, were not in line with what so many others were saying. So I went and gathered film from a couple more games to get as complete a picture as I could to present to you guys, and here's what I found. Jackson played in Chicago the last 2 years alongside of one of the most exciting young safeties in the game, Jaquan Brisker. I'm not sure that I would put Jaquan Brisker in the same quality as a Kyle Hamilton or a Brian Branch, but to me he's right there. Did a film on him in 2022. Exciting football player. I think Brisker's gravity or anti-gravity kind of pushes players around on defense. And here's what I mean. Wherever they put Jaquan Brisker was related to where Eddie Jackson and other DBs wound up. Jackson didn't have as many tackles in 2023, partially for missing time, obviously, partially because I think there's times where he looks slow. Now, is he faster than he shows on this play? Absolutely. I think there's a little bit of a lack of recognition here. This is second half of the Lions' comeback win over the Bears, where they've played spectacular defense throughout the game for the most part. Number one, to illustrate a positive here, Jackson is almost always the last guy with his mouthpiece in. I mean that in a positive manner because he's communicating things to the defense. As it relates to Jaquan Brisker, they want to get him to the point of attack. They want to get Jaquan Brisker where the ball is going to be run or passed because he's such a brilliant, explosive football player with a great burst and great hips. This, to me, is an example of maybe not being aware of the concept that was coming. I mean, there's so many possible pass plays, but it's a bunch formation by the Lions to their right. Long pass by Jared Goff. Touchdown to Jameson Williams, who's obviously electrifying in terms of speed. I mean, we should be aware of this if we're facing the Detroit Lions offense, and Jameson Williams is the point man. In this case, it happens to be 3 receivers over there. On the previous play, you're talking about there was a tight end involved. Same route concept. You've got a flat route, whether it's by a tight end or Josh Reynolds. A deeper out concept by Amon-Ra St. Brown. And then here is the post corner, flag, whatever you want to call it, by Jameson Williams. This touchdown against Tampa Bay Bucks. Very similar concept, if you ask me. My point is there's no reason why you shouldn't be aware of it, particularly as it was only, I think, 4 weeks differential between this catch in week 6 and the touchdown that I showed you to start off with. It doesn't mean that it worked all season. Here's the rematch. Jackson is at safety. Again, you have a bunch of linemen. And again, you have Jameson Williams as the point man. And he's getting out of there as quick as possible. Ends up being an interception by Jalen Johnson, who's a really high-level corner, if you ask me. Someone who's, like I said, I think really extremely highly of this Bears defense. I understand, as a Ravens fan, if you do not, I don't watch every single game live. But throughout the offseason here, being as I cover the Lions as well on this channel, I think I've watched 8 complete games of the Bears, generally focusing on the defense. And I feel like they've got a lot of high-level football players there. Brisker and Johnson being 2 of them. But same concept here. St. Brown running the more shallow out. Laporta running the deeper. It's just a flood concept. And then the corner being run by, again, Jameson Williams. You can see Eddie Jackson. Much better positioning. My point in showing you the first one is, the reason why I picked that as the first play to show you, to break down, I didn't think he had much burst in the games that I watched and focused on. The foot injury, does it play a role? I'm sure it did. And I hope the Ravens end up with a guy who has more burst than we saw on that first play that I showed you. Do I think that he's slow? No. But what I do know is there's less activity, less tackles, less interceptions in 2023 than what we had seen in previous film. 2022, he had 4 interceptions before the injury against the Jets. Like I said, I think that was either in week 11 or week 12. Gimme interception here is the only one that he had in 2023. And I'm not one of those guys who thinks that you're not productive if you don't have interceptions. In fact, I reject a lot of people who look at the game that way. Interceptions sometimes come in bunches, like home runs in baseball or softball. You're not always going to be able to hit home runs, even though you hit the ball extremely hard. In this case, Flacco's throwing the ball. Well, he's throwing the ball to Eddie Jackson, basically. You're not really getting a route here that shows awareness, I think, by Tillman of where the ball is going to be. He's looking for a vertical. Great ball skills, Eddie Jackson. Great awareness, if you ask me. I think he's a great communicator pre-snap. The film that I have from 2023, does he look extremely athletic? No. I can't say that he does. I would be lying if I said that to you. It wouldn't be in good faith. Generally, he's going to be middle of the field free safety. In the film that you see here, you do have man. We'll do a video on Brisker. I think he's an absolute dog, D-A-W-G, and I'll explain that in another video. Everybody talks about that word, D-O-G. But man-free here concept, and Eddie Jackson is a guy who's going to read the quarterback's eyes and take away routes. Generally, the first one that shows up, you as a DB, slot defender, outside defender, are going to have awareness, you're going to have knowledge, that he's going to be in position to help you out. He's not helping Jaquan Brisker here, who generally doesn't get nor need much help at all. Most film that you're seeing here is against the Bears. Plays the middle of the field free safety, occasionally plays half field safety, pre-snap. On the right-hand side in a lot of this film that you're seeing, Marcus Williams plays there. And I think you're talking about a situation where Eddie Jackson's probably going to be the left safety. Marcus Williams is probably going to be the right safety. But you got Arthur Millette and Kyle Hamilton there. I think it sets up perfectly for the Ravens if you get a really healthy version of Eddie Jackson, a guy who looks a little bit more active as the season went on last year. This play in particular is one of them. You've got a trip set, and he's definitely pointing out right here to let the backside safety, Brisker, know, going ahead and take that. I think that's Tillman, and he helps handle Moore. Brings this route to the post, and then back to the corner. Flacco's throwing it a little bit far out ahead, but nonetheless, Jackson is there to defend. Do I think he's slow? No. He looked slower in 2023 film than I would have anticipated. There was some times where seeing him break on the ball, I thought his feet could have been in the ground a little sooner. I thought his pedal, his movement skills pre-snap could have put his body in better position to break on the ball. This is a 4th and 3 against the Lions. This is the Bears' win in the rematch that is in Chicago later on in the season. I think 28-13. It's a 4th and 3. Goff immediately is looking to the right-hand side. Isn't satisfied with what he's got coverage-wise. Comes back to the dig to Josh Reynolds late. Donovan Peoples-Jones, it's not Josh Reynolds. And I think that Eddie Jackson in the past is going to be able to drive on this route, get a pass defense, make a hit on the wide receiver as the ball arrives, and he's just a step slow. Maybe it's the angle. I think a lot of times that the pre-snap movement or at the snap movement in terms of your pedal, your body level, your pad level, impacts your ability to break on the ball 1.5 or 2.5 seconds later because you're already not in good position. Essentially, there's some times that if it wasn't Eddie Jackson with 15 career interceptions and 6 career defensive touchdowns, that you would say that looks like a guy who pre-snap is being a little bit lazy. I think I made mention of it earlier. You had a career low in tackles in 2023 for Eddie Jackson. 37 tackles, no tackles for loss. Does he appear to be less active near the line of scrimmage than some of the film I watched from 2023? Yes, he does. I'm going to reference what I said about Jaquan Brisker earlier. It's almost like anti-gravity, where Jaquan Brisker, where they think the ball is going to end up, is where you want Jaquan Brisker. I haven't read any articles of Bears coaches saying that, nor have I read or watched content creators from Chicago talk about that. That's just an observation by me. Jaquan Brisker is a badass football player. As a former defensive coordinator at a much lower level than this, obviously, you want guys like him wherever the football is going. I feel like Jaquan Brisker was a guy that they sometimes moved to the field, and depending on formation and personnel, especially on third downs, was a guy who went to the receiver, the slot receiver that is, that the Bears defensive coordinator and staff thought was going to get the football. As it relates to Eddie Jackson, yes, he was moved further away from the line of scrimmage. You're talking about a guy who had 82, 76, and then 80 tackles over a 3-year period. That's 2020, 2021, and 2022. He can tackle. He only has 2 career sacks, probably not going to be used as a blitzer, but hell, the Ravens have Arthur Millette and Kyle Hamilton to handle a lot of that. Marcus Williams and Eddie Jackson certainly appear to be the guys that will be playing deeper in coverage and obvious passing situations. He's not nearly as bad of a tackler as some would make mention of. In fact, I think there's some times where he plays with really great leverage and understands where his help is, and in this case, where the sideline is as he's dealing with a guy like Alvin Kamara. I like him playing against the run from the third level, not the second, basically free safety. But where I really think he stands out, even in 2023 film, is as a defender in the red zone. Based on the film that I have seen from 2023, this is the area of the field where Eddie Jackson looked more impactful. He's versatile and smart and communicates well no matter where he is. But in this shorter space, and I mean shorter space vertically, he was able to break on throws more often. Again, at least in the film that I saw, number one. Number two, also used in man more on tight ends down here in the red zone. I don't know why the coaches did that. Jaquan Brisker appears to be a guy that they match up with tight ends more often. Nonetheless, Eddie Jackson was matched up on tight ends in the film that I had, late 2023, more often in the red zone. Athletically, I would compare him to the 2023 version of Marcus Williams that we saw, and that was the guy who was playing with a pec injury that was pretty significant, obviously. Can Eddie Jackson return to full health? Absolutely. Those injuries, those foot injuries, Les Frank, however you pronounce it, multiple people have indicated, and players have described it as something that takes a year, year and a half to move away from, even 2 years. Am I saying that it's a bad signing by my lead-in earlier? Well, no. I was surprised at the initial film that I had. Even though the Bears played well against the Lions twice, I didn't see a significant amount of plays made by Eddie Jackson compared to other players on the Bears defense. For $1.5 million, I think it's tremendous potential. For a guy with 15 career interceptions, the versatility and the confidence to execute all the different things that you see him executing, when you pair him with a guy like Marcus Williams, who is already a quarterback-type player on the defense in terms of directing people, I think it's extremely interesting to have 2 of those guys on the field at the same time with great ball skills and a history of making plays against multiple quarterbacks across the league. The relationship with Roquan Smith was apparently quite positive. Roquan said some positive things to EDC and the front office guys to cause them to perhaps exponentially more interest than they maybe already had in Eddie Jackson. I do think it's a great signing. To allocate $1.5 million to a guy with 15 career interceptions, who generally appears to be more comfortable playing in a free safety role than anything else. Well, we already have 2 nickel guys, Arthur Millette, and then Kyle Hamilton is more than a nickel defender, but at this point he's the best in the league at it, if you ask me. He's essentially Superman when lined up to the field as the slot corner/nickel defender. You don't need Eddie Jackson to be able to play in that role. The Bears didn't ask him to do so. Again, they had Jaquan Brisker, who's pretty damn good at it himself. Was there some coverage mix-ups here down in the red zone? Yeah, I don't think they were necessarily Jackson's fault, but they could have been. My point in including them was to just try to present some balance to this selection of plays. I think it's a very astute signing. 2 people in my Ravens Discord, Frank and I think Stacy, pointed out that it's also a brilliant signing in case Marcus Williams was to be hurt. Eddie Jackson generally is playing on the right side in a lot of the clips that you've seen in the film that I have in terms of a half-field safety look. If Marcus Williams was to get injured again, first of all, that would be unfortunate. We're looking forward to, at least I'm looking forward to, a complete season of him being healthy, being available, being a ball hawk back there, which is what he is when he's been available and healthy. Eddie Jackson would be a great backup option for Marcus Williams if he was out for a week or for extended time. Playing those two together will be interesting. You will have some alignments with Jackson and Marcus Williams on the field as the split field safeties and Kyle Hamilton as the nickel. You'll probably also have some alignments where Eddie Jackson is off the field. Hamilton and Marcus Williams are the half field safeties, and Arthur Millette is the nickel defender. Further options include Marlon Humphrey, who has indicated that he came into camp lighter, and some of the reports from at least this week's camp footage and reports from the media is that the defense was dominant. I do suspect there's a reason for that. I'll maybe delve into that a little bit later in a video if you're interested. I think it's a great signing, provides options for the Ravens defense for Zach Orr and those guys to deploy in a typical nickel set. You start talking about dime, which I think the Ravens should certainly look into in obvious passing situations, what with the relative inexperience of Simpson coming in as a boundary side inside linebacker. You guys let me know what you think of the video. I probably pulled a bait and switch at the end. I'm really excited to have Eddie Jackson on the Ravens roster. I didn't indicate as such early in the video because I wanted to portray the process I went through with the film evaluation. I was not as impressed with the early film that I saw. Again, I solely focused on 2023 film where he didn't force a lot of turnovers, 1 interception. Only had 37 tackles, a career low. I think 5 passes defensed and 0 tackles for loss. He appeared less active to me than the guy that people were talking about, which is why I forced myself to go back and look at games like the Packers and others to try to get a more complete look. Appreciate you guys' time. If you think other Ravens fans would enjoy this film study look at Eddie Jackson based on 2023 film solely, then please consider grabbing a link to this video, sharing it out on social media to help this content get more reach.